The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on Bridge the Gap, AA to AAA, Audit and Assurance to Advanced Audit and Assurance. ACCA Middle East, in collaboration with our approved learning partners in the region, have come up with Bridge the Gap series, and today is the second session of the series. For today's session, we have been joined by Mr. Masood Parvez, who has been teaching ACCA students for more than 20 years. His main areas of teaching are audit and assurance and performance management. He is currently working as academic director at Synergic Training and also as senior partner in an audit firm. His students have secured numerous national and international positions in both audit and assurance and advanced audit and assurance exams. He is also a certified internal auditor and a certified information system auditor. So talking about the AAA exam, it comes as no great surprise that the audit exams are one of the most challenging ACCA exams. Although there are many different reasons for this, perhaps the most fundamental is that there is a lack of scope or for repetition of pre-learned knowledge in audit. Today's session will enable all the students sitting in AAA exam in the upcoming exam sessions, so they can effectively bridge the gap between the two between AA and AAA. So before I hand over to Masood, some housekeeping rules. I would recommend that you try to attend the complete session to understand the full essence of the webinar. And secondly, you can type in your questions in the chat box, and we will be taking your questions towards the end of the session. So without further ado, I will hand over the session to Mr. Masood. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmed, for the introduction. As Ahmed have already mentioned about the topic for today, and that is bridging the gap from audit and assurance to advanced audit and assurance. So I think let's start with the agenda. I have divided my webinar or presentation into different portions. At the very outset, I will be discussing about some real issues which students faces for this particular paper. Then we will be talking about your role in the paper Advanced Audit and Assurance. So this is the very key factor to understand that in Advanced Audit and Assurance, your role is entirely different as compared to your role in the paper Audit and Assurance. Then we will be discussing the syllabus differences of Audit and Assurance and Advanced Audit and Assurance. This is again very important to understand the fact that what additional syllabus items are there in Advanced Audit and Assurance as compared to your previous paper, which you have completed. Then building a required power of expression is very, very important. At Advanced Audit and Assurance level, you need to have an appropriate level of expression. If that is not there, you will not be able to pass this paper. Skepticism is again very, very important. The level of skepticism which is required at audit and assurance level, definitely it is one of the mandatory aspect of an auditor. If you are auditing, or if you are writing procedures, or if you are evaluating any scenario, or if you are dealing with the question of risk. But the level of skepticism required at the advanced level is what you can say more important as compared to audit and assurance levels. We will be discussing on that how to build that level of professional skepticism which is required at this advanced level. I will be sharing with you a few recent journal comments from your examiner. So we should be knowing that what examiner is talking about your scripts, your answers, and what improvements are required. Then I will be talking about few practical areas, that when you are reading a scenario, that what are certain factors to consider when you are reading a scenario. Then I will try to talk on different areas, important areas, like I've selected 3 areas: risk, then we will be talking about ethics, and then we'll be talking about audit reports. So I hope everyone is listening me quite loud and clear. Okay. So let's talk about few real issues which students normally faces. The very first thing is, which I have noticed over the period of 16 to 20 years, is appetite for studies. This is one of the very basic requirement for a professional level students, that you should have the appropriate appetite for studies and a feel good factor. Whenever you are studying, you should be overwhelmed. You should feel very, very happy, because this is the time that you have to perform, and if you have a feel good factor, your performance will be very much there, which is required. So this is the first factor which I normally notice, that students do not have the required appetite. How to build it? Definitely you have to look into your study patterns. You may use colored pages, you may use good stationery, you may use notes, you may develop PowerPoint slides, you may try to teach few topics to your colleagues or friends. So this is the first thing you should be looking at. The second important thing is attempting AAA exam with the same mindset of AA. Let me explain this point in detail. Now, your role in this particular paper, like if you look at the questions, you are placed as an engagement partner. You are placed as an audit manager. So what engagement partner or audit managers normally doing in an audit firm? So normally they are dealing with client acceptance and retention. This is not a decision to be made by a junior level staff, that either to accept a client or to retain a client or not. So I think this is the first area which is of prime importance in this particular paper. Then audit quality is again something which is very, very important. And that is again a role of a senior level personnel in the firm, like engagement partner or the audit partner. So this is again your role in this particular paper. Then ethical and professional matters. Definitely you have covered these areas in your paper, Audit and Assurance as well. But at this particular level of Advanced Audit and Assurance, these ethical and professional matters are much more important. And then planning, review, and reporting stages, which are again your role in the this particular paper. Now the handicap is that majority of the students who are going to appear in this Advanced Audit and Assurance paper, they haven't worked in the firm at these levels. Like you might have worked at a audit associate level, as an audit senior level. There are very few who must be working or maybe working as an audit manager. So this is a bottleneck. How to overcome this particular bottleneck? I think the one way is that you should work in the firm. Your preference should be that you should work in the firm, which is not possible for majority of the students. And the second thing is, to overcome this bottleneck, you have to practice. So I think this second suggestion, that you have to practice more to develop that power of expression which is required from you in this particular paper. You have to think like a partner, you have to write like a partner, you have to think like an audit manager, you have to deal with the areas which are very, very important and critical, ranging from, like I already mentioned, client acceptance and retention, audit quality, ethical and professional matters, planning, review and reporting. So this particular item needs your special attention. Then lack of practical experience is, I have already discussed about it, that how to compensate. So one way is that you should go and have a practical experience. If that is not possible, So I think you can compensate it by having more practice. Fourth item is not considering ACCA intellectual levels. So I hope everyone is knowing that there are 3 ACCA intellectual levels. This particular paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance, or your strategic professional exam, they focus on the intellectual level 2nd and 3rd, primarily on the 3rd one, which is synthesis and evaluation. Now, synthesis and evaluation mean the ability of a person to identify something, to explain, to discuss, and to conclude. The very basic mistake which many students are doing in this particular paper is they are not conclusive at all. They are not what you can say assertive in their writing. They discuss something, but they do not conclude it at that level, because you are the partner of the firm, or the audit manager, or the senior partner, or the engagement partner. So you are the final authority. So my fourth observation is that majority of the students do not have any regards for the intellectual levels which ACCA have set for this particular stage. My next observation is that students are not going for the kill. They are just attempting. They are just giving it a try. You know, there is a clear difference between a student who is going for the kill and the student who is just attempting. So this is again a very, very important thing. So you have to make sure that this is your final attempt. I have seen many students who are determined that this is my final attempt. They passed. And who are double-minded, they are just attempting it just for the sake of testing it. So you are, I think, at risk. Another observation is minor areas are not very well prepared. Like you focus more on planning, you focus more on review, you focus more on risk, you focus more on maybe reporting, ethics, but there are many other areas like the regulatory framework. There are non-assurance engagement, due diligence, forensic audits, maybe audit of prospective financial statements, review engagements. So these areas, normally students do not give much time to these areas, and definitely they lose marks. Another very important observation is the SBR knowledge. It is strongly recommended and required that you should pass SBR before you attempt this paper of Advanced Audit and Assurance, or at least you should be attempting these 2 papers simultaneously. That means you have a clear knowledge and idea about your SBR knowledge. So these are few issues, or you can say few observations you have to consider. Now let's look at the syllabus part, that what is different in Audit and Assurance and Advanced Audit and Assurance. The knowledge about audit framework, the knowledge about what you can say planning, it is something you have already covered. Risk assessment you have covered in your paper Audit and Assurance. So this is an assumed knowledge for advanced level. But if you look at other areas of your syllabus, which are in your Advanced Audit and Assurance paper, there are professional issues such as money laundering. This is not the syllabus in your paper Audit and Assurance. Then your professional liability areas, then practice management areas, then quality. You know, this ISA 220 and ISQC 1, they are not tested, they are not included in the syllabus of Audit and Assurance. So it's a new standard. Same the case with 600 group audits. You know, in majority of the questions, the question about risk, the scenario is about group audits. Business risk. So you have the knowledge of audit risk, or maybe risk of material misstatements. But business risk approach to auditing is primarily tested at this particular stage. So business risk is new. Group audits is new. Audit quality is a new area. Tendering is a new area. professional liability, money laundering, forensic audits, and other engagements like ISRS, your international standards on related services, in which you have due diligence assignments, you have agreed upon procedures. So these are certain areas which requires your special attention, and nevertheless the SBR knowledge, which is again mentioned, and ISO 550 is again not included in the syllabus of audit and assurance. So I have highlighted few differences. Apart from these differences, there are many similarities. If you look at the substantive procedures, I think everyone knows substantive procedures quite very well, and they struggle a lot in the substantive procedures as well at the audit and assurance level. At audit and assurance level, your substantive procedures should be asked about the defined areas which are in your syllabus. But what about advanced audit and assurance level? In this advanced audit and assurance level, substantive procedures can be asked regarding any area of your financial statements. So substantive procedures can be asked about that area. So the scope of the paper advanced audit and assurance is very wide and vast as compared to. So if you try to attempt this paper with the same approach, with the same what you can say mindset, definitely you will not be able to pass. So you have to think like a partner, write like a partner. So partner is the final authority. So if you are dealing with any question of risk or maybe reporting or reviews, you have to take a decision that this is a qualified report, this is a disclaimer, this is an adverse opinion. There should be an emphasis of matter or other matter. So I think I have made my point very clear that the syllabus differences are to be considered as well. Now let's look at the aim. What is the aim of your paper audit and assurance? So the aim is to test a candidate understanding of the underlying theory of auditing and their ability. So it is more a mix of knowledge and application. The paper audit and assurance is a mix. So you can expect straightforward knowledge-based questions, but at the advanced audit and assurance level, you cannot expect straightforward questions of knowledge base. It's all about application of your knowledge. And for application, either you must be working for in the firm for 3-4 years, or if that is a bottleneck, if you do not have the required practical experience, then you have to practice a lot. You have to do a lot of questions again and again and again, and you have to do these questions quite carefully. Now, how to build that particular power of expression? Like I already said, that at P7 level or at advanced audit and assurance level, you have to have the required power of expression, which is missing. So my recommendations to build a power of expression, the very first important recommendation is that you guys should write on daily basis. This is my recommendation number 1. Normally, you know what students normally do? They just keep on reading the book. So reading will not serve your purpose, because in the exam you have to write. And if you're writing, you should have the required power of expression as well. If you're writing and that is not up to the mark, definitely you will not pass. So my first basic suggestion is write on daily basis, at least an hour or so. You should write, express yourself, get it checked by your tutor, by your what you can say, maybe seniors as well, if they have certain time. Then religiously attempt internal tests and taught exams, your mock exams, get yourself evaluated. I think many of the colleges, they do not charge for it. It's a free activity, or even if they charge for it, so you are getting evaluated. So whenever you got a chance to get yourself evaluated, maybe once, twice, thrice, I think you should get yourself properly evaluated. Attempt past papers carefully. I think this is again very, very important. You have to concentrate on the language used by the examiner in the past paper solutions, the golden words, the technical terminologies like audit evidence. We always talk about sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. So I think this is again very much required, that you should carefully do past papers at least from September 18 onwards, or even from March 19 onwards. You should attempt all the past papers available with you. Read examiner articles. You know, it's a very basic thing that if we go 10 years back or 12 years back, so we were waiting for examiner articles before exams, because if 2 or 3 articles are coming from the examiner before exam, so there is a high likely chances that examiner will be asking questions regarding those areas. So I think this is again very, very important to build the right power of expression. And you have to read the examiner reports as well. So quickly, I think you all understand that this power of expression cannot be built overnight, and it is quite impossible that you keep on reading the book and in the exam you go and write and excellently you write an excellent script which is up to the mark, very impressive, which includes the appropriate terminologies, which includes the appropriate conclusiveness which is required at this level, which I have already mentioned, that synthesis and evaluation is an ability to identify, explain, discuss, conclude as well. So for conclusion, you need to be assertive and you should be using the right power of expression. Okay, like I already discussed about professional skepticism. In paper audit and assurance, you are supposed to be very skeptical if you are applying analytical procedures or relating financial statements or even dealing with certain risk areas. But at this particular level of advanced audit and assurance, you need to double your skepticism level. Now, practically speaking, this is again required a practical approach, that you should be working somewhere to develop that required level of professional skepticism. You should be working, you should be dealing with different situations. If that is not possible, again, you have to attempt questions carefully. Like if I give you a very simple example, if I give you electricity bills of a manufacturing organization of the last 12 months, and I say, okay, perform a critical analysis of these electricity bills. So I think majority of the students might be working on those electricity bills. Maybe they are checking the rates, maybe they are checking the units, maybe they are checking meter number, maybe they are checking what you can say, analyzing those bills with the previous year, month-wise analysis, year-wise analysis. So I think these are something which are which normally students perform on these bills. But what I require, that you compare those electricity consumption with production. That if this is your electricity consumption, and this is what you can say the average unit which this particular machine is going to take. I'm talking from a very practical scenario. We normally do that we compare electricity consumption with production to relate that if this is the electricity consumption, that this should have been in production, which should be shown in the financial statements and the sales as well. So this is one example of a questioning mind. So you need to have a very strong questioning mind at this stage, because especially for the question of risk, you need to think very carefully that there are many cases in which going concern is being affected. There are many cases in which there are certain inherent risks which are attracting a particular scenario. But as students do not have the required perspective and they do not have the required practical experience, and unfortunately they haven't practiced up to that level, so they were unable to develop that mindset which is required to identify or pass this exam. So you need to have the required skepticism level. And again, if you are not working somewhere, you should be doing it by having more practice. One very common statement which would normally talk about is that auditors does not believe in unanswered honesty. Auditor normally question a lot, like if you're writing certain procedures. So one of the very important tool for an auditor is inquiry. You need to inquire. You need to, what you can say, review. You need to inspect. So I think, again, you should be performing procedures rather than assuming any evidence. Again, application of knowledge is the key. Do not expect simple knowledge-based question at this level. You need to apply that knowledge in particular situations, and shortly we will be talking about few areas in which application of knowledge is very important. So let me give you a quick recap. I think from our agenda items, we have discussed about real issues. I hope you will take care of these areas. We discussed about your role in paper audit and assurance. Your role is of an engagement partner and maybe audit manager. In majority of the cases, you are placed as an engagement partner audit manager. So the areas, important areas of syllabus which requires more attention, they are planning and risk assessment, client acceptance and retention, audit quality, group audits, and non-assurance engagements and current issues as well. Then we discussed about building a power of expression in which you have to read, write on daily basis, and the level of professional skepticism. So let's talk about few recent examiner comments. I have selected few and I have shortened them a bit to get them on this particular slide. So accounting standards. So one of the very important consideration of the examiner is accounting standards knowledge. If you are not good in accounting standards, it is very difficult to pass this particular paper because you are auditing the accounting treatments of those accounting standards. So you need to be very well versed about those accounting standards because you are going to audit those standards, and you should be knowing about the implications of that accounting standard with respect to the statement of financial position, statement of cash flows, or statement of comprehensive income, because these are the areas you should be auditing and focusing on. So the very first and very important comment from the examiner is the SPR syllabus and knowledge. The second important comment of the examiner is application of knowledge. Normally students try to answer what they feel like, what they know. They are not considering the particular scenario. Detailed understanding of the financial reporting standard. Again, it is being emphasized by the examiner that detailed understanding of the financial reporting standard is very important, especially when you are dealing with the question of audit risk. Weaker answers are due to use of rote learning knowledge, which is the case in paper audit and assurance. You know, I've been teaching students since long, and they are looking for some shortcut of substantive procedures. So give us some shortcut. So it's not possible to memorize. Maybe at audit and assurance level, it is possible to memorize few procedures and just to replicate those procedures in the exam. But again, you need some connection with the audit assertions. Like if you are verifying occurrence, so I think you should be knowing what I am trying to verify, or existence or completeness. So whatever you are doing in audit and assurance, you try the same in advanced audit and assurance, which is not the case. Like you identify or you talk about few audit risks, very common inherent risks, and you are trying to incorporate those root learnings in your this particular paper. It will not work. You have to talk scenario specific. Then candidates should be able to synthesize. I have already overemphasized on it. Candidates should be able to synthesize and evaluate the material. Simply listing knowledge without explaining its relevance or purpose will not be sufficient to pass the exam. Then there is a particular important with responses related to procedures where the purpose of the procedure must be given. And like, again, if you are writing a procedure, you have to give the purpose that what I am going to achieve from that particular procedure. Ethics, in that particular case, where knowing the name of an ethical threat will not be awarded credit, rather than identifying the specific way in which that threat arises in a given scenario and the implication in that specific case is required. So I hope till now we can fairly see that the scope of Advanced Audit and Assurance is much broader as compared to Audit and Assurance. I fully understand that Audit and Assurance is very relevant with respect to this particular exam, but you need some extra abilities, knowledge, power of expression, level of skepticism, and the right content to pass this particular exam. So let's talk now about a few technical areas. Whenever you are reading a scenario, especially in question number 1, very long scenarios, exhibits are given, you have to process a lot of information. So few tips from my side that whenever you are reading a detailed scenario, you have to consider few important areas. Like, is it a first year audit or a recurring audit? So I hope many of you will appreciate the fact that if it is a first year audit, you need to take care of certain additional auditing standards which are not required in a recurring audit. Like maybe you have to ISA 315, in which you have to have a background knowledge of the industry, entity, rules, regulation, laws, pronouncements to have the required planning. Then you have to talk about initial engagements, opening balances, which is not required in a recurring audit. Then in case of audit planning, you might have to take care of certain preliminary planning activities or additional planning activities which might not be required in case of a recurring audit. So first of all, kindly identify in the scenario that if it is a first year audit or a recurring audit. Then industry of the client is important. I always suggest to my students that you should be knowing about 10 key risks of certain industry. At least you should identify 10 to 12 important industries in the last 2 years, that what are the key industries right now. And you should be knowing about few generalized environmental risks, few generalized inherent risks, maybe business risks, and definitely that particular industry specific knowledge will help you in answering that particular question. So I'm not saying that whatever you have learned about industry you should try to implement in the scenario, but if you have a perspective, because as you know, whenever there's a question is industry specific, we are talking industry specific. So if you are working from the 4 or 5 years working in different industry, going to audit, scenario is different. If that is not the case, how to bridge that gap of lack of knowledge is to put extra effort to work on industry. So it is highly recommended that you should identify a few industries, maybe top 10 industries, and definitely it should be UK dominated industries, or maybe in the last 2 years there are many IT related industries which are at the boom. So focus on those industries, their inherent risks, their financial statement risks, their accounting related matters. This will help you in answering the scenario based question. Then very important factor to identify when you are reading a scenario is either it's a listed company or it's a unlisted company. Because if you talk from the ethics perspective, scenario is entirely different if you are dealing with a listed company and if you are dealing with a unlisted company. So again, it is highly recommended to identify this particular factor. Your role in the scenario is very, very important. Like I already mentioned, generally your role is of an engagement partner. Your role is of an audit manager. So identify that what is my role in the scenario, because then you have to act accordingly. Phase of the audit is again very important. For planning phase, you have to deal with the different standards like 300 series. We have to talk about 300, 315, 320, 330. Thought process is different. If you are in the execution phase, maybe 500 series is more dominating. Subsequent events, maybe opening balances, related party transactions, going concern. Definitely going concern is considered at the planning phase as well. If you are at the review and reporting stage, scenario is different. We might be focusing more on the 700 series, like your audit reports, maybe comparatives, maybe other information. So again, this is very, very important to identify the phase of the audit, that what is the phase of the audit, and then you have to think accordingly. Requirement verbs. Requirement verbs are what you can say key to passing the particular exam. Like if it is written defined, do not explain. If it is identify and explain, demonstrate, evaluate. So requirement verb understanding is again very, very important. Normally, whenever there is and in the question, so right after and there is a requirement verb. Whenever there is a comma, in the question, right after comma there is a requirement verb. So you have to consider that how many requirement verbs are there in a particular question. Then marks allocation. It's a very tricky area, like identify audit risks and give your appropriate procedures. And if you are not given with the allocation, then you have to allocate marks yourself. And normally students tend to focus more on those areas which attract less marks, and they focus more on those areas unfortunately, or less on those areas which attracts more marks. So marks allocation is again very, very important. Like generally you can learn about marks allocation by looking at the what you can say your solutions, in which at the end there's a marking scheme given. Normally if you give a heading, I will be talking about this shortly, that how to take care of this marks allocation as well. Okay, so let's talk about attempting question of risk. So I have built a small what you can say table for you guys, that whenever you are dealing with a question of risk, especially risk of material misstatements or risk of audit risk, so you have to take care that how to draft an answer. This is very, very important. Drafting an answer is very, very important. First of all, identification of the risk area. So you have to identify the risk. Say for instance, there is some issue with respect to revenue recognition. So you have to give an heading revenue recognition, or maybe inventories, or maybe government grants, or maybe financial instruments, or maybe your provisions. So you have to give an heading. Normally giving an heading fetch half marks if you look at the marking scheme. The second important thing which you have to consider is that what is the issue? The main issue, normally it is a copy and paste scenario. You in the scenario you are given with the information, and normally you have to just copy and paste. Third thing is materiality. You have to discuss about the materiality of the item you are discussing. Normally figures are provided in the exam. By using those figures you can calculate the required materiality levels as well. Fourth thing is why you think it's an issue, and that is the phase in which you have to link that particular issue with the standard. Like you said, in accordance with ISA this, in accordance with IFRS this is the requirement. Because the requirement is not being met, that's why I think it's a risk. And the fifth very important factor is implications. So it's a 5 5-tier approach. So I'm suggesting a 5-tier approach to attempt a question of risk. Let me repeat these areas for you guys. First of all, what is the area you are talking about? Second, what is the issue? It's a copy-paste scenario. Third, what are the materiality levels? If data is given, you have to talk about the significance of the amounts or the area you are talking about, why you think it's an issue, and what are certain implications, and definitely it will be impacting your audit report as well. So I have selected a sample answer from a sample exam of September, December. So let's relate whatever I have recently discussed with the examiner standard solution. So my first recommendation is to identify. So it is being identified that the issue relates to government grants. Second, what is the issue? Now, issue is being discussed in the question paper. You just copied that. The group receive a government grant of $20 million. If the 20 million grant receipt have not been recognized in full as income this financial year, the projected group profit before tax would be this. The recognition as income is therefore extremely significant to the group financial statements. So I think we have given the heading. Number second, we have identified the issue. Thirdly, we have to talk about materiality. This particular amount represents 4.2% of this, this percent of this, this percent of this, as many materiality levels which are relevant in that scenario you have to calculate. So representing 4.2% of projected group's assets and therefore material to the group financial statement. So you believe the item is material. Why you think it's an issue? This is pointer number 4. So the government grant should be now you have to relate it with the requirement of the standard. So you believe the grant should be accounted for in accordance with ISA 20, accounting for government grants and disclosure of the government assistance, which require government grants to be recognized in profit and loss on a systematic basis. So this is the issue. That's why you believe it's an issue, because it is not in accordance with the requirement of the standards. And at the last, as I suggested, you have to talk about implication. Therefore, the audit risk is that group profit is overstated by a maximum amount of $20 million and liabilities are understated by the same amount. The accounting treatment could be a deliberate attempt to enhance the appearance of the group profit for the year, and this issue should be approached with a higher degree of professional skepticism during the audit. Very assertive, very clear. You have talked about materiality. You said these are my these might be the implications. So there are certain inherent things which normally are there in the financial statement. Like management normally inherently overstate assets. They understate liabilities unless and until they have different motives. So I think you should be knowing that what are inherent intentions of the management regarding certain areas. So if I being at your place, as I mentioned earlier, I will be working on industries. I will list down 10 key risks of telecom industry, maybe 10 key risks of IT related industry, maybe 10 key risks of airline industry. So just to have equipped myself with the appropriate knowledge that whenever I'm approaching a question which is an industry specific question, so that particular information will assist me in better understanding the question and definitely attempting the answer as well. So I hope you guys can fairly relate this 5-tier approach whenever you are dealing with a question of risk, which is primarily a question of risk of material misstatement or audit risk. So you have to take care of these 5 areas. Identify the area, what is the issue, discussed about materiality, why you think it's an issue, and the implication. Quickly, if you talk about business risks, so as I mentioned earlier, that business risk is a key topic in paper Advanced Audit and Assurance. So if the question is on business risk, definitely you have to discuss about business risk. But if the question is on financial statement risk, still you can talk about business risk. But the important thing is you have to relate that business risk with financial statement risk. Say, for instance, a business is under litigation. It's a business risk. But if you do not have the required provisioning, definitely that business risk might be converted into an audit risk or risk of material misstatement. Kindly remember, if the question is of risk of material misstatement, if the question is about audit risk, definitely you will not be emphasizing on business risk. But if the question is on risk of material misstatement and you still want to talk about certain business risks which are mentioned in the question, so you can talk about those business risks, but please remember to link that particular business risk with the risk of material misstatement. Okay, so I hope you guys like this 5-tier approach. So let's talk about ethics question. Again, it's one of the very important area which normally is tested at this particular level. So again, it's a 5-tier approach to deal or to draft the answer regarding ethical and professional issues. First of all, identification of ethical issue. You have to give the heading. If the issue is about referral fee or internal audit, or the partner is going to serve on the audit committee, whatever, just give the heading for that. Secondly, the issue. Again, it's a copy and paste scenario. So you have to, what you can say, you have to copy and paste the issue. Then why you think it's an issue. So now you have to link that issue with the possible threats, which are self-interest, self-review, familiarity. I think you all people know about these threats. A very common mistake normally students do at this particular stage, they write 2-3 threats. So anyone can match with that particular issue, like gifts. So if gifts are offered to everyone, so I think it's a self-interest threat, but it might not be a familiarity threat. But if gifts are only offered to specific auditors, so there is a possibility of both threats. Self-interest threat is obviously there, and there might be familiarity threat as well. Again, you have to practice different questions given in the past paper or in the revision kits again and again, and you should have a bunch of information or maybe key areas like self-interest. These 10-20 items are of self-interest. So maybe for self-review, you identify your 10-20 items, for familiarity as well. The third point is that you have to link that issue with the possible threat. Again, you have to talk about the significance. Definitely, if engagement partner is involved in that particular scenario is different. But if a junior is involved in that particular scenario, it's entirely different. Or if the gift value is insignificant, immaterial, so scenario is different. So again, you have to talk about the significance of the threat. What is the significance? It's again very important. And then the remedial action, whatever, and conclusion. Again, you have to be very conclusive. Please remember, whenever you write a script, just give 2 to 3 seconds or 4 seconds to evaluate while sitting in the exam that am I concluding it or it's still open. If you are talking about risk, I have identified the risk and I've given my implications as well, or the discussion is still open. Same the case with the question of ethics, that either you have suggested the remedial action with a level of certainty, or you are still confused that what you are to what remedial actions and conclusions are required. So the review, like you get your work reviewed by some independent person, sell the share, Chinese wall, whatsoever your recommendations are. And again, very important factor with respect to ethics is either it's a listed company scenario or an unlisted company scenario. Okay, so we have discussed about risk. It's a 5-tier approach. Identify the area, what is the issue, materiality level, why you think it's an issue, and the implication. In case of ethics, again, you should be doing it in 5 stages: heading, the issue, link that issue with the threat, then you talk about the significance, and then you talk about remedial actions. Let's relate it with a past paper solution. Like first of all, you have to identify the heading referral fee. The issue is of referral fee. Point number one, heading the issue. What is the issue? The group audit committee understands that company cannot provide a corporate finance service but could recommend another firm. So Ranger Associate for this work, for which. So you have talked about the issue. So why you think it's an issue? Now you have to relate it with certain threats. The code states that this creates a self-interest threat to objectivity and to, you are very clear. The code states that this create a self-interest threat to professional competence and due care. A self-interest threat arises from the income generated from the referral, and this may result in audit firm recommending another firm. So you have related the issue with the threat. Thirdly, you have to talk about the significance. The code does not prohibit referral fees, but the significance of the threat should be evaluated and safeguard applied to reduce the threat to an acceptable level. Definitely, safeguards have two objectives: one, to eliminate that threat, or to reduce it to an acceptable level. And then the remedial action. Safeguards may include disclosing to the group in writing the arrangement for a referral fee to be received from Ranger Associate, obtaining advance agreement from the group. Therefore, the matter should be discussed again with the group audit committee. So, and if the committee confirms agreement with the proposed referral fee, can recommend. So again, you can relate it, the specimen answer, with this 5-tier approach. Heading, the issue, relate that issue with the threats. You have to be very, very careful in relating the issue with the threats. You are supposed to be clear that which threat is being attracted by that particular issue. There might be one or there might be more than one as well. Then the significance, do not skip talking about the significance of the threat and the remedial actions. Okay, now let's talk about report. Again, it's a short question of audit report, and definitely recently you are given with certain reports and you have to critically evaluate. There is a what you can say, a drafted report, and you have to evaluate and critically analyze, which is not the case in the paper audit and assurance. So again, I have given it a 4-tier approach when you are dealing with audit report related areas. Like if there is a conflict, first of all, identify it's a conflict or scope limitation. If you are not given with an access of documents, if you are not given access to management, if management is not sending external confirmations, these are scope limitations. So normally students get confused that it's a conflict. Definitely there is a conflict, like you want to meet some person and they're not allowing you to meet that particular individual, but it is limiting your scope. So you should be very, very clear that what constitute a scope limitation and what is a conflict with management. Next stage is you have to identify its material or material and pervasive. Again, this is a very tricky area. What is material and what is material and pervasive? Normally, material and pervasive is that it is impacting the whole financial statements. It is so again, you have to check that it is material or it is material and pervasive. Discuss with management. Again, first of all, identify it's a conflict or scope limitation. Secondly, determine its material or material and pervasive, and definitely immaterial. If it is immaterial, so logically speaking, no action is required. If it is material or material and pervasive, discuss with management. I think management either agree or disagree. If they agree, definitely you will amend the financial statements accordingly, and you are going to give an unqualified opinion on that. And if they disagree, definitely you have to consider the effect of that disagreement on the auditor's report. You know, drafting of that opinion, basis of opinion paragraph is again very, very important. I will be shortly discussing about it, that if you are giving a qualified opinion, So the basis of opinion paragraph, if you are given with the basis of opinion paragraph for a qualified opinion, so what elements should be there in that basis of opinion paragraph? This is again very, very important. So let me quickly go through about it. First of all, conflict. What is the conflict? Audit report, like I have chosen a scenario that there is a qualified opinion and you are drafting the basis of opinion paragraph or the qualification. You are drafting the qualification. So first of all, you have to talk about the conflict. What is the conflict? Like, no depreciation is provided in the financial statement. So this is your conflict. This you have to, sorry, this you have to mention in your answer. Then why you think it's an issue? Why you think it's an issue? So you have to link that disagreement or conflict with the accounting standard, that this is not in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework or applicable financial reporting standards. Specify the requirement of the standard. So this is not in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. In accordance with this particular IAS number this. So you have to mention the requirements of the standard. That's why SBR knowledge is very, very important. Even if you are talking about question of risk, or even you are talking about question of reporting. And the third thing is, so first of all, identify the conflict. This is what we are talking about, drafting the qualified opinion paragraph. Then you have to link that conflict with the accounting standard, and then the implications. The profit for the year, you have to quantify it as well. If data is available, the profit for the year will be overstated by this amount, or maybe liabilities may be understated, revenue may be overstated, expenses may be understated by this particular amount. So this again you need to quantify in this particular scenario. So I think I have taken my time of 1 hour. Let me give you guys a quick recap. This is my agenda. I think we discussed about real issues which need your kind attention. Your role is entirely different. You know, at audit and assurance level, your role is of an audit assistant, primarily focusing on procedures, substantive procedures. Maybe you are verifying non-current assets, maybe you are verifying inventories, but at this level your role is entirely different. At the planning stage, reviewing, reporting, client acceptance, quality, group audits. Then syllabus differences are there, building a power of expression. For that you are required to write on daily basis. I have suggested few very important what you can say tips to build the required level of expression. Then you need to have a very good skepticism level to pass this exam or to identify the issues. Then we discussed about few examiner comments. Examiner is trying to communicate that you should focus on SPR, you should focus on applying knowledge, and you should be very relevant to the scenario. Then a few points to consider. I think your role in the scenario, your stage of audit, requirement verbs, industry, listed company, unlisted company. So these factors are important. And then I tried to cover few of the important area like risk, ethics. We covered audit report as well. So I think Ahmed, are we having any questions from the students?
Thank you, Mr. Masood. Yes, we do have a couple of questions. So most of these questions are from a single student. Her name is Fatima. So I would start from the very first question. She has asked how to answer for risk of material misstatements.
I think I have discussed and this particular area in much more detail.
Yeah, it was from the very start of the session. The second question is how to develop the power of expression by writing with ourselves.
You know, this is a very good question. Say, for instance, you are reading a particular scenario. I have given you 5-tier approach, 4-tier approach. Try to express yourself and then try to match your answer with the standard solution of the examiner, you know, and then you can compare that what I have written. In few cases, students normally use a very simple English in answering the questions. But if you look at the examiner answer, it is using the right professional or technical jargons for that matter. And the second very important thing is, which requires your special attention, is the intellectual level, which is the third level, synthesis and evaluation. Whenever you write an answer, just have a look on that, that either I am conclusive at the end, either I am able to conclude the discussion, am I assertive, or I am still confused. So the best way is try to attempt an answer and then compare your answer with the examiner's standard solution, and then you can fairly start identifying the differences in your script, and definitely the examiner solution, whichever is given, is serving two purposes. One, the answer, and second is the knowledge as well. I fully appreciate or understand the fact that it is not practically possible to 100% replicate the answer of the examiner, but you try to achieve 60 or 70% in that particular scenario. So writing, attempting questions is the key. You know, what I have learned, if I give students a question about risk, what normally they do, they highlight, okay, this is risk number 1, this is risk number 2, and this is risk number 3, and they feel that they have attempted the question, and they feel they will write very good in the exam because they are able to identify it. But when they start writing, they struggle a lot because they do not have the required writing skills which is required at this level. Many of the students who fail at 40, 45, 47, they only work. I tried to work only on their power of expression, and they start scoring 67, maybe 70 or 65. They're not one case, there are many cases. Same person with the same knowledge, with a different level of expression, they pass exams quite comfortably. But if you have the required knowledge but do not have the required writing skills, you will not be able to pass this exam. That is for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Masood. The next question is from Asad Rahman. He has asked, when linking to scenario, do we need to mention complete standard definition of specific part of standard? For example, intangible standard have 4 requirements and scenario have 1 requirement per each.
Actually, I think it's a very important question, and I try to give a very tricky answer for that. Recommended is that you should be mentioning the maximum requirement which you can. Normally, you know, there is a debate a few years back where we all audit tutors gather at one of the ACCA conference, and there is a specialized session on audit and assurance. So there is a division between tutors. Few suggest that students should be writing the number and the name of the standard, that in accordance with ISA 550 related parties, or maybe in accordance with 570, or in accordance with this. But few consider that mentioning the number and name is not required. So it is not mandatory, but definitely it gives a very different feeling and impression to the examiner that you know the number of the accounting or auditing standard, you know the name of the accounting and auditing standard, and you know the requirement as well. So if you take my advice, if you want to make certain that you should pass this coming attempt, I think you should be writing maximum of the requirement. Definitely, you have to consider the scenario as well. Do not try to overwrite. Do not try to write what you know, but you have to be scenario specific as well.
The next question is, what's the difference between management conflict and scope limitation?
Okay, normally management conflict is on accounting treatment, on accounting standards. So the conflict with management is generally on the application of the standards. Like you are of the view that revenue should be recognized this way. They believe revenue should be recognized the other way. You believe that inventory is overvalued or undervalued. They believe this is not the case. So normally conflict with management is on the accounting treatment. Okay, but scope limitation is generally giving you access of records, documents. Like I mentioned earlier, you want to send external confirmation and they are not allowing you to send that. They are not signing it. I think it's a scope limitation. You want to visit the factory to physically inspect stores or physically inspect plant and machinery, and they are not allowing you without any reasonable cause. So I think it's a scope limit. Like recently, due to COVID, many of the stock taking are done through drone cameras because there is a limitation that you cannot physically go there, but there is a solution for that. So the basic difference between conflict with management is primarily on the accounting treatment of different accounting standards. And scope limitation is with respect to giving you access to records, documents, personnels. So I think you can fairly identify the difference between these two.
Thank you, Mr. Masood. Guys, we still have a couple of minutes. In the meantime, I would request Mr. Masood if he can show us the slide where, if students need to reach out to you directly. So if you can share.
So this is these are my details. You can email me anytime, and I will try to answer as early as possible. Or you can visit our website as well, or you can call as well. So these are the details.
So guys, if you have any more questions, we'll give 30 more seconds in order to take if you have any further questions. In the meantime, I would just like to remind you that the standard entry deadline for the September exam session is 2nd of August. So if you're planning to enter for any of the exams, you have until 2nd of August to avail standard entry charges, and after that you will have to pay the late exam entry charges.
I think they all are accountants. They can well calculate the time value of money as well.
Absolutely.
They will pay as late as possible.
Right. So I guess there are no more questions at the moment. So let's just wrap it for today, and we'll reconvene tomorrow for another session. We have tomorrow the third session for the Bridge the Gap series. So any one of you who are planning to enter for the advanced financial management paper, we have another session tomorrow. Until then, take care and take good care of yourself. And thank you so much, Mr. Masood and the Synergic team for such an engaging session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.